Tommy's got 3 minutes. Tommy's got time.
Good afternoon, colleagues. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we begin, let you guys know that all these briefings, the presentations are going to be available online under briefings. They're not available now, but they will be soon. So just have a little patience. Also want to remind everybody, tonight is our first committee dinner. Everybody has that on their schedule. It's Chop Tank at Chop Tank. So I think it's at 6, is that right? 6 o'clock. Try and be there prompt, guys. I know one of the problems we've had in the past, and I'm going to try and remedy that, is the amount of time we wait between arrival and actually sitting down for dinner. And I know a lot of us have a multitude of things to do, so we'll try to deal with that in course. So today we're starting this afternoon with a briefing by the Public Service Commission staff. In this case, it's the electricity and gas regulation in Maryland. It's Mr. Anthony Myers and Benjamin Baker. We missing someone?
Mr. Myers, I don't think will be joining us, or he may be a little late.
And you are Mr. Baker.
I am Mr. Baker.
Okay, sir, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ben Baker. I'm a Senior Commission Advisor with the Maryland Public Service Commission. I've worked for the Maryland Public Service Commission in various roles over the last 5 years, and it's been a privilege. So today, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, I'm going to have an opportunity to talk with you about gas and electricity, more from a technical perspective. I didn't really receive a prompt other than gas and electricity, so we're going technical. And we're going to then talk a bit about jurisdiction between gas and electric in terms of federal versus state. And then also just talk a bit more in depth about some of the concepts that were touched on this morning by the commissioners, a little bit about operations and how some of the, I guess, cases operate that we oversee. So, yes, so utility regulation. We want to make sure that it's safe. We want to make sure that we aren't having explosions, lines down, fires. Reliable. When somebody turns on their lights, or when somebody turns on the switch, we want to know the light's coming on. And that's part of it. And then the other part is also the effective and economic regulation. And so this mission statement you have up here from the Maryland PSC, you're going to find that at a lot of different commissions, this idea of safe, reliable, and economic service. And economic service really is we're always trying to understand that, figure it out, because it's one, what's the economic efficiently way to deliver the electricity for customers to pay for it? So thinking about, I want you to not be afraid to turn on your light switch, but I want you to not want to waste it. But I also, on top of that, though, we have state policies that we have to implement, and so that can also impact how we choose to charge our customers. So utility rates and setting of them really is a blend of economics, policy, and, well, I guess, human judgment at the end of the day. And so we, as the Maryland Public Service Commission, have to balance all those interests, the public's interest, the utilities' interest, special interest, and focusing on the laws of the state that you give us through the PUA, which means we have to consider the environment. We have to consider, we have to consider the environment. We have to consider public safety. We have to consider fair labor standards. And so there's a number of issues that have to go into how we regulate our utilities. At the core of this, at the regulatory compact level, we allow our gas and electric utilities to have effectively exclusive franchises throughout our territories. Basically, they have a protected service territory that we don't allow competition into. And what we also, by doing that, they're given an opportunity to recover their prudently incurred costs, those costs that we determine were necessary to serve the customers to meet the public goals that we have set at a rate of return that is fair. Now, that's up to debate on how you set fair, but that's part of the magic that goes into the rate cases. And but effectively, that fair rate of return should not afford the utility to make speculative earnings. It really should be what a comparable company in a competitive market would make. And so we're acting as that competitive competition to that. And in return, they're going to provide safe and reliable services. the electric and gas systems, they're really, you can break them into three parts. As we had many discussions today, supply, generation, that's one part. Second is the transmission, the bulk power system, the moving over long distances, moving vast quantities to a local distribution system, which is where we, the Maryland Public Service Commission, step in, which is that local spot here in Maryland. And so we predominantly focus on the distribution system. That's where most of our authority resides. And that's the rate setting, that's the safety, that's the reliability standards we set. That's can you or can you not force somebody to pay to connect to the system. Those are all issues that we deal with at the jurisdictional level. But we don't have as much authority when we get into the supply and the transmission as we were having, I think you saw in a number of the discussions today. And so, but the couple of areas we do have jurisdiction over are one, procurement. So you, the legislature, have passed laws that say we want 50% renewables by X date, or we want 100% at another date. And so now we have to make sure that our utilities are complying with that and procuring, and the retail suppliers too. So basically anyone who buys gas or electricity really on behalf of our customers, we make sure that they're purchasing the appropriate amounts of that. We also focus on the default rate. So today the chairman had some was discussing retail choice and competition in the state and concerns that he had with it. On the flip side, customers can choose to get their commodity from the utility. We oversee what that rate is that those utilities charge. So that default rate, we have we follow a policy on that. And then finally, the CPCN process that was also mentioned. So those are the three areas where we get involved in supply and transmission, at least directly. We can obviously be interveners at the federal level, at PJM, at FERC, but we are an intervener at that point. We don't have the ability to set standards and codes. So who are these counterparts? There's FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They regulate the interstate commerce of electricity and gas. Where that really impacts us the most is the wholesale energy markets. There's a number of them throughout the United States. The one we are a part of is PJM. Another, if you've ever heard of CAISO in California, that's really the only one in the West. And then you have ISO New England, you have S&P, and MISO. So there's a number of these acronyms that float around in this space that really, and they operate mostly in the Midwest, the Northeast, and on the West Coast. The South doesn't really have it, nor does most of the West. One exception is in Texas, where they have their own power system or their own operator for that whole state, but it's not really overseen by FERC because they've been careful not to allow it to go over state boundaries. So PJM, who are they? They're a coordinator. They're independent from really all the entities. They are answerable to FERC. They coordinate the 13 states' bulk power system in terms of the generation that flows over the transmission to our houses. And effectively, maybe a simple way to think of them is their job is to coordinate the procurement, the delivery, and the availability of energy in these markets today and in the future. And so that's what they're predominantly focused on. Go to the next slide. This is just simply a picture of where they operate, 13 states, and basically the market that we participate in is Maryland. So getting it specific into the electric system. So as I was saying here, generation, transmission, they make up the wholesale market. Let's see here. That was predominantly came about in the 1990s via restructuring. So our utilities, they used to own the generation, the transmission, the distribution system. A number of them still do own their transmission systems, but that's regulated by FERC, and they set the rates for those systems. The generation, though, in the 90s, they were required by law to divest their assets and sell them to third parties. And so basically that is how we got into the PJM. They divested their assets to third-party companies, and we create this power market across the 13 states in Washington, D.C., from which we can procure power from any of these generators that are in that market. And so basically the delivery, and that's all handled by PJM up until it gets to the distribution system, which is where we would take over. Interesting thing about where the grid has been and where it's going, if you want to flip to the next page, you can. And this is just a picture of what I'm talking about. Generation used to be centralized and far away from everyone. Now we can have it in our own houses with distributed energy resources. DER is the acronym we'll use for that. And solar is probably the predominant one that you're familiar with. And one of the policies would be net energy metering, whereby we allow a customer to have a solar panel on their house, and we track how much that generates versus how much they consume and net that against what we charge them. And so, but basically, energy which used to go from one direction, flowing from the generators through the transmission system to the distribution system, now we have a bi-directional flow, and this is one of the conversations that was happening this morning, which was, well, are there ways that we can manage the local distribution system to avoid upgrading the transmission system or procuring additional generation further up the line? As we go forward in the future, it's going to probably have to be a bit of both. But that's one of the tools that will be at our disposal. But it's a neat little thing. And so just some things to think about when you're considering the electric system is traditionally we've had dispatchable resources. These were your coal plants, your nuclear plants. To a certain extent, they don't like to turn off, but your nuclear plants could turn up and down a little bit. And then natural gas plants, oil plants, coal plants, basically the ones they would consume fuel. When I turned on a light switch, one of them would work a little harder to move electricity down the line. Now with the advent of renewables, solar, wind, geothermal, they generate when they want to generate into the markets. And so at lower penetrations of those, so lower size of those on our systems, that's very manageable in terms of handling the variability of these resources. But as they start to come up in scale and size, that's when the real fun and games begin in terms of solving a problem of how we will manage our system with resources that really generate when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining and when it's not, and also the fact that they disappear all at once like solar. And so it's not just our system that's having to deal with this, other systems as well as are having to deal with that as well. But that's just part of the thing, and where the chairman was discussing this morning storage and how that is kind of a holy grail for really breaking through on renewable penetration onto our systems. And so transmission-wise, that's mostly planned by PJM and FERC, and then finally get down to the distribution systems where we flip. So now getting into the gas system. So our gas systems are, well, frankly, they're very similar to our electric system, but your supply is coming via the pipes. It's not coming via wire. And what it really means is where it's really different is in terms of the speed at which it comes to you. Electricity is instantaneous. You turn on a light, a generator somewhere else is going to pick it up immediately, and we're going to be fine. Gas has to be delivered. We have to think about it much further ahead of time because it's not going to be able to move at those same speeds. And so we're really thinking about pressures when we're talking about gas and getting it where we need to come from. So gas and for our systems can really come from anywhere in the United States as long as we have a pipeline to get it to us and we want to schedule it far enough in advance. Utilities will buy this gas or the retail suppliers, who I'll talk about in a second, to be delivered to what we would call the city gate or the local distribution system. And at that point, they would take over and deliver it, and that's where, once again, our regulations take over. But it's slow moving, and so therefore things like storage and planning ahead on gas become important in that. And storage for the gas system is different than electricity because storage, I just need a big hole in the ground as long as it's capped. I can pump it in there, but electricity, I might need something like lithium ion or technologies that aren't really there yet. There are some, but that aren't, or I won't even say not there yet. I think they're developing rapidly. It's just a, are we there yet question. So if you flip really quick. So this is just, once again, a drawing of the gas system. We have our wellheads, which is basically where we pull it out of the ground. Natural gas is not in its state that we can consume it when it comes out of the ground. It has to be purified clean. That's where you get things like propane and butane. That basically goes through a refining process to break the natural gas that comes out of the ground into where you need it. And even then, we have standards for what can go over our pipelines to make sure they don't degrade and last over a long period of time. Another interesting thing is natural gas does not smell like eggs when it comes out of the ground. It's because we put it in there so that we know if there's a leak on the system. And so that is actually part of our requirements, is you have to odorize the gas. Some interesting things about natural gas is some terms you'll hear thrown around. One of them is renewable natural gas. Similar, it's not really maybe with the feed source where I get it from is different, but in terms of when I consume it at the end of the day, it still has to have similar properties to the natural gas that I'm burning that came out of the ground, because I don't want it to degrade my pipes. So therefore, I have to worry about the chemical makeup of that natural gas still. Another hot topic that we've heard about lately in the gas industry, or at least that I've heard about, is certified natural gas, responsibly sourced gas. Basically, some of the natural gas companies are starting to pay the suppliers, those who pump gas out of the ground, a potential premium to basically certify that the wellheads aren't leaking as much gas at that point in time, or methane, in order to control their emissions. So, wholesale versus retail choice. Back in the 1990s, when we deregulated, or not deregulated, but we divested our power plants, we did say, okay, we're going to allow retail competition. Customers can choose who they buy their commodity from, which is the transmission and the generation piece of their energy. We did that for both gas and electricity. And so we have allowed our, the customer can choose to make those purchases. And we don't regulate those retail choice rates, except for in one regard, which started actually in January of this year, which is we do have authority over low income rates. So if a supplier chooses to serve a low income customer starting in July, then they will need a contract effectively that's approved by us, where we say, yes, you can serve this rate to a low income customer. And effectively what it is they have to guarantee that that low income customer will not be paying a rate above the default rate in this state. And as I was saying earlier, the commission control the retail rate that the utility charges. For electricity, we call it SOS. What that is effectively we have 4 rolling 2-year contracts for residential customers, where we go out every 6 months and we bid part of our load to the open market. We select a supplier to provide that, or maybe more, and basically their job is for the price that we bid, we roll that into a rolling 2-year average rate that we charge our customers. Natural gas we call sales service. That we leave a little more up to our utilities in terms of they have their own procurement practices to buy that, but then once a year we do a review to make sure that that gas was competitively procured. But at the end of the day, whether you're using retail choice or wholesale, once it goes on the distribution system, the utility is responsible from getting it from point A to point B, which is from the system to you, the consumer. So that's the markets, high level, how the system works. So a little bit more about how we, the commission, operate, and a little bit more of a deep dive in some of the stuff we discussed earlier today. So as the chairman said, our bread and butter that we're probably most well known for is rate setting and so this is basically what rate should they charge customers? Was it prudent that the companies charge the rates they charge? I'll hop into that more in a second. We also worry about setting standards for utilities. This should be line extension policies. Should the customers have to pay? What rate should customers pay to be able to connect to our systems? Or what deposits should a customer pay? Late fees. Really just kind of if we want the utilities to, how we want them to treat our customers. Let's see what else here. Safety and reliability standards. We also implement the programs and pilots that you as the legislature have requested us to do, and I'll be getting into a number of those here at the end just to give a little survey of those, but those would be EVs, Empower, which is our energy efficiency program, STRIDE. Really anything that's come through the legislation, PSC has to implement. And then finally, we also oversee some low-income programs for our customers. So on the utility cost recovery piece, I like to easily maybe describe it as a pie. First, we have to, in the rate case, determine how big of a pie do we give the utility, and then we have to divide it up amongst the various customer classes to say you are responsible for this portion of the pie and how much. And so what we're doing there is first we're determining did the utility prudently spend its cost? Is it appropriate that what they did if we're using a traditional rate making strategy, which is what I'll talk about first, which is, my apologies, let me step back. We have 2 rate making paradigms in Maryland now. We have a traditional one whereby we only set the rates based off the utility's historical spend. And that's how we've done it for years. And so what we would do is basically say, what did you spend over the last 12 to 13 months? And we would examine, is that how we assume you're going to spend that money in the future? With the Exelon utilities, we are now running multi-year rate plan pilots, where effectively what we're doing is we're letting the utilities set rates 3 years in the future based off projected costs. And so we go through a case to set what those rates should be. At the end of that, we do the prudency review to determine did you appropriately spend your money, and we'll also do a true up at that point in terms of once we determine what your prudent spend was versus what you recovered. So those are the two rate making paradigms we now have in Maryland for our utilities on the gas and electric side. So the first part was that prudent spend, as I was discussing. Second part is what return are we going to let them have on rate base, on capital in the ground, which the People's Council was discussing, which is basically what we're going to say. Our utilities earn a return on the steel that they put in the ground. So every pole, every pipe, every wire that is in the ground that we say is prudent, we effectively treat it like a mini mortgage. We spread it out over 20, 30, 40 years, whatever we consider the useful life of that asset. And they get a little return on that we set over the entire life of that asset. Finally, as I was saying, we have to now determine how we split the pie. We do that based off of a cost of service study, which is basically we're just trying to, with our best guess, determine which customer class made me spend this money. It's obviously not a perfect science. We have a whole bunch of witnesses who get together, and well, not get together, but everyone submits testimony and argues about it, and then the commission needs to make a decision about how they view that. And then finally, we set the rates, and we can recover the money from the customers in really three general ways. One is fixed rates. You're going to pay a fixed cost every month no matter what happens. A variable rate, which increases the more energy you use over the month. And then demand charges. That's predominantly, demand is really only for our industrial and commercial customers. We don't charge that to our residential customers, but basically that is a charge for the single highest usage of energy in the month. So if we were to break into 15-minute chunks, we'd say, when did you use the most energy in 15 minutes? That's what we're going to charge you for. And if you talk to utilities and a number of people who are in the planning space, that's a way to control at least one of the better cost signals I can give a customer, because when I plan my utility system, I usually care about the system peak and some local peaks. Because if you think about it, or even your circuit breaker, if you think about your circuit breaker at your house, you turn on your microwave, your dishwasher, your laundry machine all at the same time, all in the same circuit, it's probably going to go off. Similar problem would happen with our electric grid. And so basically our utility planners are looking at peaks to determine, okay, do I need to do an upgrade? Do I need to do something different? And so demand charges are one way to consider that. Another is what we call a time of use rate, which is still a variable rate where I'm going to collect it based off your kilowatt hours used, but I'm going to charge you for that energy over during certain hours of the day. So I can simulate a demand charge without creating a demand charge, which is kind of a cool thing. But either way, as we go into this future paradigm of how distribution system planning and thinking about how we can manage peaks and utility upgrades, this is one way that we can send price signals to our customers, or to incentivize customers not to use electricity or gas at certain times of the day, so I don't have to engage in an upgrade. Let's see here. So just some examples of proceedings that we currently have at the commission. Energy efficiency, one of our big ones, pretty well known, and power programs. Some of you who live at least in the BG&E service territory, you probably get a weekly or a bi-weekly reminder with a little smiley face telling you how you're doing relative to your neighbors. That's an Empower behavior program. So anyways, the Empower program operates on a 3-year cycle. It's traditionally been set assuming that we're going to reduce energy by a certain percentage each year, and we will give customers money to either buy energy efficient appliances or to change their behavior to basically use less electricity. The current cycle ends in 2023. And actually over the last 2 years, the commission has had a work group engaged trying to determine what should we switch up our goal structure and how we operate our Empower programs. And we have some proposed legislation that we are looking at, where basically we would switch the targets for energy efficiency from percent reductions to greenhouse gas reduction. And so we're hoping that gains some traction. But the energy efficiency programs work on 3-year cycles, and we're in the end of this year's, and so we'll have to start our new one upcoming in the next year, and so we'll have to have a decision on our structures here. The next one is our electric vehicle pilot. We've been operating a 5-year pilot that will end at the end of 2023, where we've let our utilities offer rebates for chargers. We've allowed them to do some utility ownership and also pilot different rate structures, such as time of use rates, green rates, for customers on these EV chargers. And so we're going to be studying what that did it incentivize, does this business model work going forward. But basically, we've been operating those EV pilots, and something that's been near and dear to our chairman and our commission over the last 5 years. Another proceeding we have going is the IIJ funding, IRA funding, basically federal dollars. And we want to make sure our utilities are actually accessing these dollars for these grid modernization projects that the feds have made available. And so we basically require them to make monthly filings with the commission, and they're supposed to be trying to find ways to secure this funding. And we've also had educational sessions on it, and I believe we're going to be continuing to do more on that front. I did mention net energy metering earlier. This is a program that's been actually operating in the state for a while, whereby we let the customer put the solar on their house, and when the solar is less than their load, their energy being consumed, it just simply reduces it. But if the customer is using less energy than the solar generation is making, we'll let it go back onto the grid, and we will compensate that customer when we do a true-up at the end of the year against the load that we did record, such that we basically net it out, and so net energy metering. But basically, we're setting it up such that the customer, if they use less energy than they did produce, we don't charge them for it. Community solar. So, as I was talking about net energy metering, one of the things to be able to do net energy metering, is you need to have the capital to install your own solar plant. And you need to be able to, how would I put it? Basically, you need the right house for it. You need to have a roof that can take it or enough land. And so not all customers have access to net energy metering. So we've been running a community solar pilot for the last couple of years, and it's still going on, where basically we're allowing developers to build solar plants that are not attached to homes. And customers can buy into these projects. So instead of investing in their own system, they buy in for a portion of the energy. And then what we do is we track what they used versus what was produced, what they bought, and then we do that similar netting style for them at the end. So basically, we're letting them participate in NEM without actually having to make the investment at their house. The last two, electrification, our climate bill from last year, where electrification was a thing that electrification is where the state was pointing where they'd like to go. And so a number of state agencies were directed to produce reports for the legislature on how we can do electrification and what that means. So we're currently running a work group to produce a report for our portion of that and how that's going to affect the energy, both the electric and the gas systems over the next 10 years. And then finally, energy storage pilots. The legislature passed a couple years ago a law that said we would allow 4 of our investor-owned utilities, so the big ones, PE, Pepco, Delmarva, and BG&E, to each have 2 pilot programs that are supposed to help us avoid distribution system upgrades. So once again, getting to, can I use energy resources to avoid spending money on my systems? And basically, we're going to pilot that and see if we can do that with our energy storage systems and see what that does for the grid and the cost-benefit analyses that follow from it. And we were also studying other business models, utility ownership, third-party ownership, and some combination of that in between. And so that's going on right now, and hopefully will conclude soon. I know a couple of them are on the ground and operating as of now. Then finally, just wanted to touch a little bit on our low-income programs. I put a lot on this slide. I won't talk about all of them, but I wanted to make sure you had all the information. We run effectively 2 low-income programs, which is Universal Service Protection, which basically protects our customers from service termination in the winter for not paying their bills, and the electric service programs, which are very similar to USPP, but it's also really focused on helping these customers pay their bills through retirement of arrearages, receiving payments for current bills, and then also access to weatherization programs. But an interesting thing is we don't decide who is eligible. That's done by the Office of Home Energy Programs and DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development. But we coordinate with them, our utilities coordinate with them. Once we determine a customer is eligible, they will receive those funds from the OAHEP and DHCD, and then the utilities will make sure that these customer protections I've just described are afforded to those customers. And then also I should say we also make sure nonprofits can help our customers. Fuel Fund of Maryland is a good advocate for our customers and others such as Salvation Army and other sources out there. So there's other people as well looking out for our customers or those who are less fortunate and need some help with their bills. So with that, thank you for the honor of been presenting to you, and a great day. I'm here to answer any questions.
Before you get to you, Mark, let's go to Fraser O'Doggle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being out here. So very, very quickly, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but not in a lot of detail. Are you doing anything when it comes to like vehicle to grid backup or residential backup, evening out some of those peak loads or anything? I know that there are other states that are doing some of that, and I'm curious if you have started researching that and see what that looks like.
I would have to get back to you. I only recently started as the Senior Commission Advisor, so I'm still understanding what we've done in the EV program. But I do know that is a technology that we should probably be looking into in terms of the fact that that is an option, whether we can use people's batteries or their vehicles, which are effectively moving batteries,
Right.
to help us power our grid. I will say in the electric storage pilots, we do have, so in the storage pilots, we do have a program similar to that it's the virtual power plant model, and that's being done in the Delmarva Peninsula, and I believe it's Elk Neck. And so, but what we're doing there is they basically given out batteries to various customers in the service territory, and the utility will be able to access those batteries to help with grid operations. And so that's a part of the pilot, is seeing how that goes. Did customers want to buy into it? What did that look like? And so, but that is I think an example of where you would like, or what you were asking about, maybe, but not with the electric vehicles. Electric school. I was just reminded, the electric school bus pilot.
Yep. And, I'm aware of that one.
Yeah, and I think that's also happening there as well. Okay, definitely.
Next, Mr. Ahrens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two one's really quick, the other one's a little bit different. One, when you talk about peak usage, when you start charging, do you have an intelligent system there? Because a lot of these smaller restaurants and what have you, as soon as they get hit with that fee, as soon as they go over, let's say all the compressors kick on, from that point on, they are paying me a premium for the rest of the month on every kilowatt hour. And I'm asking, do you have an intelligent system that actually learns their usage? Because it isn't just once it happens every other day. So I wonder if there's a logical way to eliminate some of that by you all understanding that there is a peak constantly.
So basically, is there a way that could be leveraged, or are you asking if we have a program that would help customers leverage that idea? Sorry.
Well, I guess I'm asking twofold.
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's kind of a gouge on these people. You know, if I went in there and programmed my compressors to turn on every 27 minutes, that would be one thing. But every day I get this surge, or every couple of days I'll get a surge when all the stars line up right. And that seems to be a little bit hard on the businesses, because they're not using that energy every minute of every day. They're using it to start off their day. Maybe when they come in the morning, the freezers all start opening up. And I think that's a little bit unfair to the business.
Got it. So yeah, so there are, so at least in our basically those who have AMI meters, which are automatic meters, basically we have meters that do allow us to get daily, or actually down to like 15-minute reads or even more often. But we do have the ability on a number of our utility systems now to get granular data, and customers can access that and download it and look at it. In terms of real time where the customer is receiving an alert from the utility on that, I don't think we have a program like that today, but maybe Mr. Myers weigh in on that.
So yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair. Anthony Myers, I'm the Executive Director of Technical Staff at the Public Service Commission. in response to your question, while there might be technologies that would measure the volatility from day to day, the way that the demand charges are designed, they're designed to capture the aspect of the network that the customer uses. So while the customer's usage might vary, the network, the distribution network has to be designed to accommodate that peak usage. And so while that usage may be able to be measured, the rates would not vary in that manner.
Again, that's one time, though. I do it every day. I mean, I turn on my systems, it happens. My other question was on battery storage, which we all think it's a pretty good idea. I was with some of my county commissioners, and one of the problems they had with battery storage was, I guess in their district, or their community, they had a fire. And the battery storage, as far as when you recommend all this stuff, are you doing anything on the other side? Because we work purely on volunteers in most of the communities on the Eastern Shore. They don't have the technology to put these fires out. And when you talk about the toxic fumes and all that, is there any consideration that you all give to that? Recommending it?
I want to make sure I understand the question. Is there any consideration that we give to?
Supporting and promoting these battery storage systems and these electric vehicles and stuff. When there is a fire, there's toxic fumes that come out. And to put that fire out, it's not like putting water on it. That doesn't help. So I wonder what's been put into that when we all sit out here and we say this is a great idea. It is a good idea. However, when we do have a problem, these local communities, I mean, they literally sit there and they can't really respond to the fire because it's just going to burn. They don't have the technology to completely smother it.
So absolutely, safety and reliability are paramount requirements that the commission is charged with. And part of the commission's process and part of the commission's open and public process is that the commission considers a variety of issues that anyone is free to raise in the context of a matter that's before the commission. And so to the extent that there were an issue, the commission considers these types of, the commission considers, for example, at its weekly administrative meetings, all types of safety-related issues that may come up. The commission would give due consideration to a technology that it believed, for example, was unsafe, and give direction to the utilities to accommodate whatever those conclusions were reached.
It's only unsafe when there's a problem. I get that, but I do.
And we also follow, standards, national standards, state and local standards also that are also addressing these types of safety measures.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I told you I was controlling this.
That was good. So you mentioned that gas moves really slowly through the pipes, and I was wondering if you could tell Delegate Aronson, excuse me, how he could fix that, because he doesn't have that problem. So thank you.
It was really a horrible joke, but thank you. Is there anyone else? Delegate Queen, were you good? Good luck. Good luck. Yes, and for posterity, it's been recorded. Thank you. We'll try again next week. Okay, I believe that that's all the questions we have. Thank you very much for your presentation. Again, I look forward to hearing from you guys when the time is right. And as I've been saying a lot of the presenters, letters are great, but your testimony is a little better. It allows my colleagues to get in questions they may not have been able to get in or think about today. So I do look forward to having you guys appear in front of my committee more often. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Maryland Energy Administration, the Honorable and former Chairman Senator Paul Pinsky and London Farrig. Outstanding. Landon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Landon Farrig. I'm Legislative Liaison for MEA, so glad to be here. I just want to take a brief moment to introduce our new director who came on board on Inauguration Day. Paul Pinsky has been a longtime state servant. Many of you are familiar with him. Many of you are quite familiar with him. He spent a long time advocating for and overseeing environmental issues in the ECM Committee, and he has spent the last few years as chair of that committee. We're very lucky to have him come over to the Maryland Energy Administration. We experience with his experience before the legislature and bringing a new look, a new feel to that agency.
Great. Thank you, Landon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, committee members, both those returning and new to the committee. I am the new director, and while I spent many years in the legislature, both in this chamber and in the other one across the street, I've been director since Thursday, so it's 4 work days. So understand that, and so I'm told that skiers say, "Don't get your head over your skis." I will be very patient and slow and give a broad brush presentation because I am new to the agency, and the governor and I in the second floor were coordinating in terms of a new direction. So I do want to give some broad brush comments. Then you'll get an overview of the agency from Mr. Farag, and then we have other staff here if you have more technical questions about what we do or what we don't do. Last year, with this committee's significant input, the General Assembly passed the Climate Solutions Now Act. As you recall, those who were in the legislature, it calls for a 60% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2031 and a net carbon neutral by 2045. Another key component was, depending how you describe it, addressing overburdened communities, Justice 40, environmental justice, but basically focusing on the disproportionately affected communities across the state. Also, last week, the governor, in his inauguration speech, which I know you listened to carefully, he said, "And we will put Maryland on track to generate 100% clean energy by 2035, creating thousands of jobs in the process. Clean energy will not just be part of our economy, clean energy will define our economy. This requires everyone, companies, communities, our government, and the people, to take bold and decisive action together." That was from our new governor 6 days ago. If done right, we can create both jobs and save money. And I think that's important to understand. It's an economic issue, it's an environmental issue, it's a public safety issue. Our agency, the Energy Administration, is self-funded. It is not funded from the general fund in the budget. We're self-funded. The proceeds primarily come from RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. They auction every quarter to companies who buy the credits, and that money comes to our agency, which then gets distributed, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That money will go, on the one hand, to grants, rebates, and loans towards energy efficiency and clean energy. And on the other hand, a significant portion, approximately half, will go to low-income ratepayers to help subsidize their energy bill. So for those who are new to the committee or the legislature, self-funded comes in and then it's split in 2 pots. Now, last year, we pushed out over $70 million for close to 5,000 to 6,000 projects. Most of them were small rebates, $1,000 here, $1,500 here, $2,000 there. The larger projects were in the range of $100,000 to $1 million. So these are projects or rebates that your constituents are applying for. They put up solar, they apply for a rebate, or they have a significant project in your region, they come to the agency to get a grant. So that money is going back to the citizens and investors who are trying to move towards clean energy and energy efficiency. Last year's Inflation Reduction Act included $360 billion with a B towards climate. Now, that money will go to MDOT, it'll go, in our state, we won't get all 360 billion, but pots of that, part of the pot will go to MDOT, will go to the Department of the Environment, the Energy Administration, and probably some other agencies. There are a few that are formula-driven that'll come to the state, and others are competitive. So those states that come in with a plan, a program, a response to the allocation, hopefully we'll get that money. And it potentially, and there's $134 million that is formula-driven that we know we're going to receive. So if we spend another $70 million like we did last year and receive the $134 million, that's $200 million in grants, loans, and rebates. Now, if we can access some of the competitive grants, we could potentially have $20, $50, $100 million also available to the state of Maryland to go out towards energy efficiency, shifting to clean energy, renewable energy, and also help the ratepayers. So, and this is in addition to last year's IIJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which also allowed some money. So we have a lot on our plate. And I'm just learning what is not only on the plate, but how the plate gets set. I've told staff that we are going to be more intentional in our work. We have a new administration. We all know that. The last administration was there for 8 years. There's a new governor, there's a new director. So we are going to do some reorientation. And I've talked with a staff of using two lenses in letting the grants, loans, and rebates. As a result of the Climate Solutions Now Act that you played such a significant part in, and its bold mandated reductions, we want to look at the greenhouse gas reductions per investment. In other words, we want to quantify if there are 10 proposals and this one gets X amount of reduction of greenhouse gases per $1,000 or $100,000, and another project is a lot less responsive where we get less bang for the buck, we want to be a lot more intentional, because reaching that 60% goal is going to be a challenge. I think when we voted on that bill last year, we know it's going to be a challenge. You know, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been captured, LEDs and lights, things like that. Now we go after some of the big efforts. So we want to be more intentional in giving out that money. So one lens will be the reduction per investment. The second lens gets back to the question of those that have been disproportionately affected, or the overburdened communities. And in many cases, not all cases, it's the Black and brown communities, where emissions are high, asthma is high, and other factors resulting from greenhouse gases and climate change affect those communities, who in some cases have been ignored. So that's the second lens we're going to use in our effort to be a little bit more thoughtful and intentional going forward. You know, that it's been 4 days. I'm just getting to know my staff, understand what they know, learn what I don't know. And I will tell you, I am not an expert on energy. There's some things I know fairly well. I've had energy legislation. I think many, many years ago, with the first offshore wind bill introduced in this legislature, was under my name. It didn't pass under my name. I think it passed under a former governor, Governor O'Malley at that point. So there are many things I don't know, which I'm learning. And we're also working towards that reorientation of policy, coming from both the new administration and the existing law that you put into place, including the Climate Solutions Now Act. So with that, let me pass it on to our legislative director, Landon Farrig.
Thank you, Director. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I just wanted to introduce kind of MEA to some of the new members here of the committee, tell you who we are and how we can help you benefit your constituency. So MEA is the energy policy shop for the state of Maryland. we are legislatively mandated not just to advise the governor, but to advise the General Assembly. That means we're happy to help with constituent questions and services to the extent practicable. We're happy to answer any policy questions you may have. That policy work also takes us before the Public Service Commission. We've worked on offshore wind and power. The PSC just before us was talking about the distribution system they oversee. There's a distribution planning process there that we're also a part of. And on the national stage before FERC, we've worked on efforts to expand net energy metering and also transmission cost allocation, deciding who ultimately pays for those new transmission lines that are needed for offshore wind or new large developments. In addition to assisting in policy matters, we can also bring value to your constituents in the truest form, and that's money. For local governments, we have smart energy communities. FY22, we provided 27 awards in 16 communities, large and small, estimated to save over 4 million kilowatt hours. That means a savings of money and also emissions as well. For schools, MEA has a decarbonizing public schools program, provides assistance to the local school board to bring on board staff, software, and other assets to help manage costs and consumption when it comes to energy. Jointly with the Interagency Board on School Investment, the program also provides funds for the planning of net zero schools. So far, MEA has provided grants for 6 out of 24 LEAs in the state, and we have the resources to continue expanding that. For businesses, we're investing in decarbonization. Grants for the conversion of fleet vehicles, including recently we funded the purchase of electric tractor trailers, probably some of the first in the state, maybe on the eastern seaboard for a distribution company. We also provide rebates for business and residents alike to install EV chargers. FY22, we had 2,000 such rebates. And we have also provided funding for electric fleet vehicles under the Clean Fuels Incentive Program. Last but not least, low to moderate income residents. MEA has a very successful and sizable LMI energy efficiency program where we invest heavily in low to moderate income energy efficiency. MEA deployed over 17 million across 34 grants at FY22 and is expected to deploy over 19 million in 23. We also introduced a supplemental program to add solar to low-income homes that have been successfully updated, the roofing structure, to make it sound for those investments. So that's not a complete picture of what we do or all our programs by any means, but it is a snapshot of the way that we can help you benefit your constituents in your district. So please reach out, and we look forward to working with each and every one of you.
And let me just add one or two very quick points, Mr. Chairman, if I could. When people apply for a grant, for example, for $500,000 for a project, it's got to be vetted. You know, is this for real? Can they get the funding? Or if it's a loan, can they follow through? And that's the front end. But there's a back end, and that's accountability. In other words, a grant is let to ensure that the public's money is used in an appropriate way and what was promised is delivered. There's a back end, and we have staff who are tracking their progress and how the money is expended. Because it's not just, here, free to be you and me, here's money, here's do this, do that. It looks like a great project. It doesn't end there. So we have staff who track it all the way to completion to make sure that there's accountability and that the state and the state's funds are not abused. So there are multiple, we have a policy section, we have a program section to oversee solar and geothermal and this energy efficiency. So there are a lot of types of programs out there that we have to track and ensure, and we have obviously our internal operations. So again, I'm getting to know it. If you have questions about some aspect of the program, please feel free to ask, and we have staff to help answer questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, as Mr. Director, would you like to go?
Director.
Outstanding, Mr. Director. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. As I said, everybody coming from my committee, I do look forward to hearing your testimony with issues. In years past, we've we've missed a lot of that, of a lot of the expertise, input, and opinions. And letters are great, but I think your voice would be significant in some of these issues. So I look forward to hearing from you in front of my committee as well. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And lastly, colleagues, we have one more briefing with the Maryland Clean Energy Center. Kathleen Magruder, Stephen Cowan, Brian Toll, and Wade Harley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kathy Magruder, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center. Very happy to be here today with two of my colleagues. Several of them couldn't join us. This is Stephen Cowan. He's our Chief Investment Officer, and Wade Harley is the Director of the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. I also wanted to introduce you to Charmaine Brown, who we've just brought on board to run our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and programs. At the end of this presentation today, I want you to have a clear picture of what a green bank is and what it does, what MCEC is and what we do, and how the state benefits from having a green bank. I know there's a lot of content in the slide deck, and I promise you we will not go through every slide. A lot of it's there for your information purposes. Next slide. What is a green bank and what does it do? Green banks do not accept deposits and do not act in a manner that regulates banks. Thank you. Green banks use public funding to crowd in private capital for targeted investment to achieve environmental goals and desired outcome. Once again, crowding in private capital. Green banks can fund project design, development, management, and operation, and can invest in underserved communities to assist consumers without the profit motive characteristic of traditional capital providers. We can stack capital, incentives, and grants in a bundled financing package. What is MCEC and what do? We partner with, but we're different than, the Maryland Energy Administration. We are a quasi-governmental instrumentality that serves as a statewide green bank with the mission to increase clean energy jobs, drive commercialization of climate-related technologies, and enable consumer adoption of clean energy products and services to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In that work, we facilitate access to capital and operate financing programs. We provide specialized procurement and technical support to facilitate project implementation, and we support climate tech commercialization. We offer outreach and education programs and events to stimulate markets and enable climate justice. Why does Maryland need a green bank? Clean Energy Center is a coordinating hub for clean energy and climate change mitigation project development and financing. We effectively line investment with solution deployment strategies to expedite achievement of the directives of the Climate Solutions Now Act. And to that end, we're a neutral third-party convener where we match resource to need. There's no other entity in the state operating in the interest of the Maryland tax and ratepayers acting as a coordinating hub to deploy clean energy and climate mitigation technologies and strategies in the manner that we do. So just so you know, the outcomes and the metrics that we track for our impact are showing that in the past 12 years, we've leveraged over $165 million of private capital against $12.1 million in public spending. And that results in a certain number of industry job hours, greenhouse gas reduction, kilowatt hours saved, cost savings for our clients, BTU therms, and gallons of water conserved. We want you to know that in terms of the timing and political considerations that we're dealing with right now is the passage of the Climate Solutions Now Act, and the goals that were set by Maryland are aggressive. Combined with funding commitments to support the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, we want to deploy more clean energy technologies, and we're looking at the funding in the Inflation Recovery Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and going after those funds in a way that will benefit all Maryland's ratepayers. The Climate Solutions Now Act included language that created the Climate Catalytic Capital, or what we are calling the C3 Fund for short, that will manage flexible financing tools. We are standing up a revolving loan fund, an equity investment fund, a block grant program, and a capacity building fund, because we've learned that many communities really aren't ready for debt and financing. They need help developing projects and getting into a position where they're ready to deploy solutions. These tools are all being designed to fund outcomes linked to measurable greenhouse gas reduction and climate justice outcomes. And I want to share with you, this is a small graph to see from the screen, but if you look in your packet, you'll see we are creating a framework where we're looking at technologies, the energy piece, built environment, transportation strategies, the ag and forestry sector, and how source reduction and carbon sequestration can work in those sectors, waste management and waste solutions, the capture of waste steam for heat, for example. And then we have a cross-cutting category that looks at soft skills like on-the-job training, capacity building in communities, outreach and education, and planning and assessment. And if you look at the audiences, we are working to address consumers, small business and commercial audiences, institutional and municipal, industrial and manufacturing, producers and distributors in the ag and forestry space, NGOs and entrepreneurs. And the idea is to bring the resources to the table aligned with the strategies that will most directly impact greenhouse gas reductions for investment. How is MCEC funded? We have a $1.2 million annual operation grant that we received as of FY23. And in the bill that was passed through the Climate Solutions Now Act, there's a $15 million slug of capital, $5 million increments over 3 years, beginning in this July, to act as a leveraging fund. I want you to note that compared to other green banks in the region, their operating funds are on an annual basis. Delaware gets $8 million a year. The DC Green Bank is funded with $7 million and started with a $60 million balance sheet. The Connecticut Green Bank gets $28 million a year. NYSERDA collects $90 million a year for their research and development support, and the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, $22 million. The New York Green Bank and the Montgomery County Green Bank, which were capitalized in tranches, Montgomery County Green Bank has a $6 million initial capitalization and $17 million recently from a fuel tax passed by the county. MCEC earns some fee revenue from its financing transactions and technical support work. We receive funding through our sponsorships and donations to support our events. Maryland now has some of the most ambitious goals for greenhouse gas emission reduction in the nation. As you can see, in comparison, the Clean Energy Center is undercapitalized. I want to share with you the financing programs that we run. The Clean Energy Advantage Program offers lending capital to residential consumers to make improvements. We have access to over $30 million through the Clean Energy Credit Union out of Colorado, partnered with Empower ratepayer incentives to help customers who have homes in Maryland. Our Small Business and Commercial MD PACE program provides, through the Property Assessed Clean Energy Lending Vehicle, assistance for small business and commercial property owners. And this now includes funding for stormwater management, resilience, energy, electric vehicle infrastructure, and resilience measures. The Maryland Clean Energy Capital Program uses our bond issuance to assist with taxable and tax-exempt rates for improvements by municipalities, school districts, and institutions. And if you'll go to the next slide, Wade, as we walk through that, you'll just see all of this information is in your packet. I'm trying to not hold you up. We've done over $46 million in funding for energy efficiency and clean energy projects on universities across the state. You just go ahead. I'm jumping ahead here. Okay. I'm trying to, there you go. And I've included in your packet the case studies for each of those projects that we've done at Coppin State University, at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the University of Maryland College Park. We're currently working with Morgan State University on a master energy sustainability plan, and they've implemented over $50 million worth of improvements in the past 2 years to help bring their campus up to speed and to make it as energy efficient as it can be. We can do those types of projects in your communities with school systems and colleges that you have there as well. We're currently working with federal grants to do things. We have a federal grant to look at the opportunity to deploy wood waste biomass solutions using clean technologies in communities that can work with a distributed energy solution. And I want to introduce you to the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator, which Wade operates. This is where we are wrapping executive expertise around technologies that are coming out of Maryland labs and universities and providing sort of coaching to get them to become companies. You can see on the first slide that we've done over 43 companies accelerated and 12 new companies formed. They've raised over $5 million in equity to start up and $6.8 million in grants. We run a pre-accelerator program, a launchpad program, and an accelerator program. And Wade, if you can show them some examples of the logos of the companies that we're working with. Also in your packet are a list of the types of technologies that these companies are discovering. Our graduated companies are now capturing more grant funds and private equity investment to take them to the next stage of development. We're also starting to get calls from researchers from out of state wanting to bring their technology to Maryland to create a company through this program. We run our outreach and education efforts, including our Policy Watch program, the Connecting to the Energy Economy Speaker Series, Clean Energy Summit, and we're getting ready to publish our Energy 101 document. For those of you that aren't familiar with all the acronyms that you heard about today, that will all be explained in that document. Well, I'd like to invite you to attend our legislative reception on Thursday, February 23rd at the Governor Calvert House. And the Clean Energy Summit is scheduled to take place on October 17th at the College Park Marriott Hotel and Conference Center, and our theme this year is Decarbonization Strategies and Solutions. You'll find hundreds of thought leaders, policymakers, and stakeholders who are working in this space at that conference. I do want to share with you a new program that we launched this year that's become very successful. We're working with realtors who have come to us saying that they try to sell properties with solar on them, and they don't know enough about the technology to effectively advise their customer or their buyers. So we have developed and are now offering a continuing education program for realtors across the state. We've run programs in 3 jurisdictions so far. We have 6 scheduled for between now and the end of the fiscal year. And if you have anyone that might be interested in learning more about this who's a realtor, please have them contact our office. And then Wade, the last slide. Again, I mentioned Charmaine Brown and launching our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. Charmaine will be helping us make sure that we are pursuing and deploying resources in those underserved and overburdened communities that can most use the help to advance and adopt clean energy and climate mitigation strategies. So on behalf of our board of directors, I thank you again for your time and your interest in our work, and I'm happy to answer any questions while we're here.
Well, we do have Delegate Arentz with a question.
Just 2 things. First, point of personal privilege. I'd like to welcome Ms. Magruder. She's a constituent. The other good question I have for you, and I think it's important, I appreciate you doing this, are these classes accredited, do you know, with the?
They are. We've worked with the Realtors Association to make sure that they are able to get their CE credits for taking the classes.
If you could forward some information on that for me,
Absolutely.
I'd gladly put that out there.
We
But
certainly
thank you
will.
for being here.
We
Thank you,
certainly
Mr.
will. And Delegate Arentz, thank you for that welcome. I do want to say that we would be happy to try to find a way to provide resources and support for firefighters who need to deal with fighting electric vehicle fires. And I also want to recognize that a lot of work is being done at the University of Maryland Research Center on battery technologies that are less hazardous than lithium battery. In fact, one of our researchers, Dr. Eric Waxman, who's been at this table with me before, has discovered and is now manufacturing a ceramic substrate battery that does not catch fire at a manufacturing facility that he's built in Beltsville, Maryland. With millions of dollars of support from companies like Lockheed and Nissan. So there are solutions coming, but I do appreciate what it might mean to be a firefighter standing there saying, what do we do here? So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Quick, I did have a question on the realtor component. So I've bought properties in the past that have solar, and what you're asking the buyer to do is to assign, you assign the contract from the prior property owner to the new one. Are you teaching the realtors to share with the buyer the value of that contract? Is it a good deal? Is it a maybe not so good deal? My experience has been that these solar contracts are signed as almost a door-to-door sales component to it, so the buyer, to be blunt, may or may not have gotten the best deal possible. So I've out of personal experience, I would just ask you, are you giving the realtors the ability to understand what those contracts are before they assign it to the new buyer of that house?
We are, Delegate Adams, we are. We're trying to help them also get access to people who can help do technical assessments for a property with a solar installation to make sure that that installation is operating effectively, or so they know where they can find those resources for their clients. It's just each contract, depending on whether if it's a lease contract or a power purchase agreement, helping them understand the different types of buying options that their clients may or may not have engaged in.
I believe that's all the questions that my colleagues have today, so I want to say thank you guys very much for your presentation.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Colleagues, I believe that ends the presentations for today. Again, I would urge each and every one of you to come to the dinner tonight. It's our first one, first of many, but it would be nice to be collegial and spend some time with your people on the committee. So look forward to seeing everyone there timely if you can make it, please. Thank you.